My mom called me a stupid child during Christmas, so I reminded her how much I've been financially supporting the family. The whole room went completely silent. I always picture Christmas as the moment I'd finally get to share the news, the kind of news that would make my family proud. I was going to announce my engagement to the love of my life and the big promotion I had worked so hard for. But instead, that night didn't just go badly, it shattered everything. And honestly, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. To really get it, you have to understand what it was like growing up in my family. I was the classic middle child, which basically meant I was invisible. My older brother, Lucas, was the golden boy. In my mother Catherine's eyes, he could do no wrong. He's a doctor now, a fact she never lets anyone forget. Then there was Sophia, my younger sister, the baby of the family, the little princess who got away with absolutely everything. She ended up becoming a successful lawyer. And then there was me, Emma, stuck in the middle, just scrambling for a fraction of the attention and approval that they seemed to get so effortlessly. From the moment I could grasp our family dynamic, I knew I had to work twice as hard for half the credit. Lucas could bring home a B+ and get a pat on the back. I had to maintain straight A's just to get a nod. Sophia could throw a tantrum and break a vase, and it was just cute. She was just expressing herself. If I so much as raised my voice, I was being disrespectful and needed an attitude adjustment. I remember working 2 jobs all through high school, at the local grocery store and tutoring younger kids. It wasn't because we needed the money. It was because I thought that if I could contribute, if I could prove my worth with dollar signs, my parents would finally see me. I saved every penny. I bought my mom flowers for Mother's Day, jewelry for her birthday, and Christmas gifts that I'd spend weeks picking out. Lucas and Sophia would grab something last minute from the mall, and somehow their gifts always got the biggest smiles and the longest hugs. College was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to prove myself in a field I was passionate about. I chose marketing. I loved the creativity, the strategy, the art of telling a story that connects with people. But when I told my family, my mother's face just fell. You would have thought I'd announced I was dropping out. Marketing, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. That's not a real career, Emma. It's just playing with pretty pictures and slogans. Why can't you be more like Lucas and do something that actually helps people? Or like Sophia, something that takes real intellect and changes the world. Those words stung more than I ever let on. But I pushed through, graduated with honors, and landed my first job at a small marketing agency. I slowly climbed the ladder, taking on extra projects, staying late, coming in early, proving myself over and over again. Every small victory, every new client, every successful campaign, I'd call home, bursting with pride. And the conversations always ended the same way. That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Lucas just got published in another medical journal? Or that's great. Sophia just won another huge case. She's really making a name for herself. For years, I kept trying. I sent cards. I called every week. I never forgot a birthday or an anniversary. When my parents moved into their new house when I was 28, I spent my entire vacation painting walls and unpacking boxes while my siblings were too busy with their important jobs. I dog-sat their German Shepherd whenever they went out of town, even though I'm allergic. I'd spend the whole weekend sneezing, popping antihistamines. When my father, Edward, had emergency gallbladder surgery, I took a week off work to drive him to appointments and sat with my mom in the waiting room for 5 hours. Lucas was in surgery, and Sophia was in court. But later, I was the one who got a lecture about how I should have called them both more often with updates. The worst part wasn't even the lack of recognition. It was the constant comparison. Every conversation found its way back to how much more successful or accomplished my siblings were. Family dinners felt like an endurance sport, where I'd sit and listen to them celebrate achievements that, while impressive, were treated like Nobel Prizes simply because they came from the golden children. But this past fall, things in my own life started clicking into place. My boyfriend James, who I'd been with for 3 years, proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. The ring was simple, it was perfect, but more importantly, he saw me in a way my family never had. He celebrated my wins at work, he encouraged my passions, and he never once made me feel like I had to compete for his affection. Around the same time, My boss promoted me to senior marketing coordinator. It came with a huge raise and the chance to lead my own team. It was everything I'd been working toward. For the first time, I felt genuinely proud of myself. I couldn't wait to share both pieces of news with my family at Christmas. I kept telling myself, this time, it would be different. Christmas morning started like it always did. The house was decorated the same way it had been for 20 years. White lights, red and gold ornaments, and the same angel on top of the tree since I was 5. The air smelled of cinnamon rolls and coffee. I showed up around 9 a.m., my arms loaded with gifts and my heart filled with nervous excitement. James was with his family out in Portland, but we were planning a celebration when he got back. I'd been carrying my engagement ring in my purse for months, waiting to announce it in person. My dad met me at the door with one of his big bear hugs. He'd always been the more sensitive one. "There's my marketing genius," he said, taking the gifts. "How's the new position treating you?" I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Actually, Dad, I have some really exciting news to share with everyone." "Oh yeah? Can't wait to hear it, sweetheart." Just then, my mother appeared in the doorway, wearing the red cashmere sweater I'd bought her for her birthday. She looked me up and down with that familiar, critical gaze, as if she'd already found something wrong. "Emma, what on earth are you wearing? That green dress makes you look completely washed out, and your hair looks like you just rolled out of bed." "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "I actually spent an hour on my hair." "Well, you should have spent 2, she replied, turning toward the kitchen. "Sophia looks absolutely stunning in her new navy dress. You should ask her where she shops." And there she was, Sophia, in the living room, looking flawless in a tailored dress that probably cost more than my rent. Lucas was on the couch, checking his phone, probably for messages from the hospital, looking effortlessly stylish in his expensive watch and sweater. "Look who finally decided to show up," Sophia said with a little smirk. "We've been waiting to start presents." "I'm 6 minutes late because I had to get gas," I muttered, but no one was listening. The gift exchange went exactly as I predicted. Lucas gave everyone expensive gift cards he'd clearly bought on Christmas Eve, and my mom gushed about how thoughtful he was. Sophia got my parents a weekend getaway to a fancy spa, which earned her 20 minutes of applause. I had spent weeks picking out personalized gifts. A vintage medical textbook for Lucas, a leather briefcase with Sophia's initials, and a custom photo album for my parents with pictures I'd spent 50 hours digitizing and restoring. "Oh, how nice," my mother said, flipping through the album quickly. "This must have taken you some time." "Yep, about 50 hours, I said. I had to scan all the old photos and—" "That's sweet, dear. Lucas, show everyone that new watch your colleague gave you." And just like that, the moment was over. My dad squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "This is beautiful, Emma. Thank you." But the conversation had already moved on. As the morning turned into afternoon, more family arrived. The house filled up, and I found myself in the kitchen, helping my mom with dinner, just like always. "The turkey needs to come out in 20 minutes, she said, not looking up from the potatoes she was mashing. "And someone needs to set the table. Where's Sophia?" "She's talking to Grandma Margaret." "Well, she shouldn't have to worry about kitchen duty. She works so hard all week." I bit my tongue. I work hard all week, too, but that never seemed to factor into the equation. As we got closer to dinner, my anxiety grew. I planned to make my announcement during dessert. I kept touching the ring box in my purse, telling myself this was happy news. But as I watched my mother's face light up every time Lucas told a story or Sophia mentioned a win in court, I started to feel that old, familiar dread. Dinner was served at 3 p.m. sharp. We all sat at the dining room table, set with my mother's best china. The conversation flowed around the usual topics: Lucas's growing practice, Sophia's promotion to junior partner. I chimed in when I was spoken to, waiting for the right moment. "So, Emma," my grandmother asked during a lull, "are you still working at that little advertising place?" "It's a marketing company, Grandma." "And yes, I am. Actually, I have some great news about that." Before I could finish, my mother jumped in. "Emma thinks making pretty pictures for companies is a real career. I keep telling her she should go back to school for something more substantial, like nursing." "Marketing is a real career, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I just got promoted to senior coordinator. I'm going to be leading my own team." "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," my Aunt Clara said sweetly. Thank you. And actually, I have even bigger news than that. My heart was pounding. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small velvet box. This was it. James proposed, I said, opening the box to show the ring. We're engaged. The reaction was polite. My dad broke into a genuine smile. My grandmother squeezed my hand, but my mother's expression was flat, almost bored. Sophia asked, "When did this happen?" "In October. We went away for the weekend." "Okay," my mother cut in, her voice sharp. "So you've been engaged for almost 4 months, and you're just now telling us." "I wanted to tell you all in person, as a family." "Well, that's just typical of you, Emma. Always so secretive. No wonder we never know what's going on in your life." I felt that familiar sting. "I'm not secretive, Mom. I call every week. I just wanted this to be special." Lucas piped up, "What does James do again?" I told him at least 3 times. "He's a high school English teacher." "A teacher," my mother repeated, the disappointment obvious. "Well, I suppose that's stable." The way she said it made her opinion clear. Not impressive, not successful, not good enough. It didn't matter that James was brilliant and kind and treated me like I was the most important person in the world. "He's a wonderful man," my grandmother said firmly. "When do we get to meet him properly?" "Soon, I hope. He's with his family for Christmas, but we're planning a dinner next month." "Well, I hope he knows what he's getting into," Sophia muttered with a small laugh. "Emma's always been the difficult one." "I'm not difficult," I started to say, but my mother was already nodding. "Emma has always been challenging," she said, as if I wasn't even there. "Never quite figured out how to make things easy." The words hit me like a punch, but I tried to shake it off. My dad raised his glass. "Well, I think it's fantastic news. To Emma and James." A few people mumbled a toast, but the moment was forced. The conversation quickly moved on, and I was left sitting there, the ring box still open in my hand, feeling smaller than ever. As dessert was served, my mother launched into a detailed account of Lucas's latest achievements, a feature in a medical journal, a speaking engagement in Chicago. Then she seamlessly transitioned to Sophia. And Sophia just won the biggest case of her career. The settlement was in the 6 figures. "That's amazing, Sophia." "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. She just mumbled, "Thanks," without looking up from her phone. I sat there, listening to the praise heaped on my siblings, waiting for anyone to circle back to my engagement or my promotion. But it never happened. It was like I'd never said a word. Then, my mother looked directly at me and said the words that would change everything. "You know, Emma, I've been thinking about this engagement of yours. And I have to be honest. I'm worried about James. I mean, what kind of man proposes to you?" The table went silent. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Well, let's be realistic," she said. "You're 32. You work in a field that barely pays the bills. You live in that tiny apartment, and you've never really accomplished anything significant. You're the most useless child we have. I just hope James realizes what he's signing up for." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye on me. My aunt looked horrified. My dad was shaking his head. Even Lucas and Sophia seemed stunned. But for the first time in my life, instead of shrinking, instead of trying to laugh it off, something inside me snapped. It was 32 years of buried frustration, and it was finally coming out. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling. I looked my mother dead in the eye. "Then stop calling me when you need money," I said, my voice calm and clear. Her face fell. The arrogant confidence vanished, replaced by shock. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "I'm talking about the $1,600 I've been sending you every month for the last 3 years to cover your car payments because Dad's business was struggling," I said. "I'm talking about the $3,000 I gave you last spring for his surgery when your insurance didn't cover everything. I'm talking about the $2,000 I sent you to help pay for Sophia's bar exam fees because she'd blown her trust fund on a trip to Europe." I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app with surprisingly steady hands. "Want to see the receipts?" I asked, holding up the screen. "I have them all right here. Every single transfer. Every emergency loan that somehow never got paid back." My Aunt Clara was staring at me, her mouth open. My Uncle Frank had put his fork down. "Emma," my dad started, but I wasn't done. "Remember last Christmas, when Lucas's student loans went into default. Who do you think paid them off? It wasn't you two. It was me. With the $10,000 I had been saving for a down payment on a house. Lucas's face went pale. Emma, I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Because Mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass you, and that I should just consider it my contribution to the family. I turned back to my mother, who looked like a fish out of water. My contribution? You want to know what kind of man proposes to someone like me? The kind of man who sees that I've been single-handedly keeping this family afloat from my meaningless job and my pathetic apartment. The kind of man who realizes I've been sacrificing my own future to take care of everyone else. I never asked you to, my mother whispered. You absolutely did. You call me crying about the car payments. You call me panicking about the surgery. And every single time I helped. Because that's what the useless child does while the successful ones get all the credit and none of the responsibility. Sophia finally spoke up, her voice small. I didn't know you paid for my bar exam. You weren't supposed to. I started reading dates and numbers from my phone. September 15th, $1,600 to Catherine Walsh, car payment. October 3rd, $1,600, car payment. November 7th, $2,000 to Edward Walsh, medical expenses. My father was staring at my mother. Catherine, is this true? It's not what it sounds like, she said quickly. Emma was just helping out temporarily. Temporarily? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. It's been 3 years, Mom. 3 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drive around in a car I'm paying for, complaining about how your useless daughter is such a failure. My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. Honey, why didn't you ever tell us? Tears were finally starting to well up in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of relief. Because I thought if I could just help enough, if I could just prove my value, maybe I'd finally earn the love and respect that Lucas and Sophia get for free. I thought if I could be useful, maybe Mom would stop looking at me with disappointment. I turned my attention back to my mother, my voice stronger now. You want to know what James sees in me? He sees someone who has been working her ass off to support her family while they belittle her career. He sees someone who's been the actual backbone of this family while being treated like she's worthless. Lucas shook his head. Emma, if I'd known. You'd what? You'd have treated me with basic human decency? That's all I ever wanted. I looked at Sophia, who was staring at her plate. And you? Do you have any idea how many times I've covered for you? Not just with money. When you were too hungover to help Mom move, who spent their weekend packing boxes. When you were too busy to visit Dad in the hospital, who sat with him for hours. Emma, my dad said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. She made me promise not to tell you. She said it would hurt your pride. Said I was the most financially stable one. Funny how I go from being useless to stable, depending on what she needs from me. My mother found her voice again. You're being dramatic, Emma. This is what families do. No, Mom. What families do is support each other. What you do is take my money while telling everyone I'm worthless. You use me as your personal ATM while treating me like an embarrassment. I pushed my chair back from the table. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out just how useless I really am. Because as of today, the bank of Emma is permanently closed. I grabbed my coat and purse, but turned at the doorway one last time. My wedding is going to be beautiful. James and I are going to build an amazing life together, free from the constant criticism and manipulation I've accepted as normal for 32 years. Anyone who wants to be a part of that life with kindness and respect is welcome. Anyone who doesn't, well, you can keep my number for emergencies, but don't expect me to answer. And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, leaving behind a table of stunned faces and a mother who finally knew what it felt like to be left speechless. The week after Christmas was a blur. My phone started blowing up before I even got home, and it didn't stop for days. But for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to answer every call, to manage everyone's feelings. When James got back from Portland, he found me on my couch, still in my Christmas dress, just staring at my phone as it buzzed with notifications. I can't believe I actually did that. I kept repeating. I can, he said, pulling me into a hug. I've been waiting for you to do that for years. I just knew you had to get there on your own. But what if I was too harsh? He looked at me seriously. Emma, you paid your mother's car note for 3 years while she called you useless. There is no universe in which you were too harsh. The calls and texts rolled in. My dad was first. His voice was heavy with regret. Emma, honey, I am so sorry. It's not just about the money. It's about everything. I should have stood up for you all those years. I should have said something. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from him. Lucas called the next day. Emma, I feel awful. I want to pay you back. It's not about the money, Lucas. It's that you never once thought to ask if I was okay. You just assumed I was fine. You're right, he said quietly. I guess I always saw you as the strong one. I was the one who couldn't say no. I corrected him. There's a difference. Sophia waited 3 days. She was defensive. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic. It's not like anyone forced you to give us money. Sophia, I said, exhausted. Do you remember calling me the difficult one right after Mom called me useless? Do you have any idea how that felt? I was just joking. It wasn't a joke to me. Can you remember the last time you or Lucas said something genuinely kind to me? Or celebrated one of my successes? She was silent. That's the problem. You don't think about it. You just take. My mother was, predictably, the most persistent. Her voicemails went from angry, Emma, this is ridiculous, call me back, to pleading, you're tearing this family apart, to a weak attempt at negotiation, maybe we can work something out about the money. Finally, a few days later, she called, and I decided to pick up. Emma, she said, her voice small. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I waited. What I said at dinner was unforgivable. You're not useless. You've been holding this family together, and I've treated you terribly. It was the closest to a real apology I'd ever heard from her. I think maybe I saw myself in you. I was a middle child too. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And instead of protecting you from that, I made it worse. I pushed you because I wanted you to be tougher than I was. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a crack in the armor. The first glimpse of self-awareness I'd ever seen. The money stops, Mom. All of it. I understand, she said. And the criticism stops, too. I won't be talked down to anymore. I'll try, she promised. Don't try, I said. Do better. Because if you can't, James and I are building our life without you in it. It was an ultimatum, but for the first time, I was setting boundaries I was prepared to enforce. Over the next few months, my life transformed. The constant financial anxiety disappeared. For the first time, I was building my own savings. James and I opened a joint account and started planning our wedding and our future. Without the weight of my family's drama, I felt lighter. My work improved so much that my boss started talking about another promotion. My father and I grew closer than ever. It turned out he had no idea the extent of the money my mother was taking from me. They started going to financial counseling. Lucas started calling just to check in, to ask about my life. Sophia and I were civil but distant. I learned that you can't fix every relationship, and that's okay. My connection with my mother was still complicated, but she was trying. Decades of habit are hard to break, but she'd catch herself before making a critical comment, and she'd try to ask about my work without being dismissive. 6 months after that disastrous Christmas, James and I got married in a small ceremony at a beautiful historic inn. The guest list was small, filled only with people who genuinely supported us. My dad walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. During the reception, he gave a toast that made me cry. Emma has always been the heart of our family, he said, even when we didn't deserve it. James, you're not just marrying a wonderful woman. You're marrying someone who will move heaven and earth for the people she loves. I just hope you never take that for granted the way some of us have. It was a public acknowledgement of years of imbalance, and it meant the world to me. Even my mother managed to say, I'm sorry it took me so long to see what an amazing daughter I have. But the real victory came during our first dance. As James held me, surrounded by people who loved us, I felt something I'd never experienced at a family gathering before. Pure, uncomplicated joy. No regrets. James whispered. None, I said, and I meant it. The months that followed were a revelation. We bought a small house with the money I'd saved. My career took off. I was no longer the useless child. I was running my own department. One evening, about a year after the wedding, my mom called. Emma, she said, her voice soft. I ran into an old neighbor today. and she asked about you. I found myself telling her all about your promotion and your new house and how proud I am of you. And then I realized, I don't think I've ever actually told you that. There was a pause. Told me what, Mom? That I'm proud of you. That I've always been proud of you, even when I was too stubborn to admit it. You're an incredible woman, Emma. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it out loud. I had waited my whole life to hear those words, and they came at a time when I no longer needed them to feel whole. But hearing them, knowing they were sincere, felt good. Thank you, Mom, I said. That means a lot. After I hung up, James smiled at me. What does that feel? It feels good, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. But I think I would have been okay either way. And that was the real triumph. It wasn't just that my family had finally started to respect me. It was that I had finally learned to respect myself enough to demand it, and to build a life that didn't depend on their approval for my happiness. I learned that the family you choose can be just as important as the one you're born into. And that little girl who spent her life trying to earn love had finally grown into a woman who knew she was worthy of it all along. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with your family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, thank you for listening. I hope it helps someone else find the courage to speak their truth, to know their worth, and to demand the respect they deserve.